Welcome to the Humanities Team podcast with me, Steve Farrell. Humanities Team is an international spiritual movement whose purpose is to communicate and demonstrate the timeless truth that we are all one, with the divine and all life, caring for each other and the world we share, so that people's actions reflect this profound understanding within our generation. We believe that living this truth is essential to resolving the most chronic and acute world challenges and vital to creating a flourishing world of peace, harmony, and happiness. We offer transformative education programs in personal and spiritual development, and we host an annual event called Global Oneness Day. Similar to Earth Day, which galvanized the global environmental movement, Global Oneness Day has become a catalyst for spiritual activism and an integral part of the present-day global oneness movement, which represents a profound new paradigm in human culture. Humanities Team is the only global nonprofit organization working in transformational education. Since we are a nonprofit, there is no focus on growing profits or satisfying shareholders, and 100% of all revenue goes toward our work supporting conscious evolution, planetary awakening, and flourishing at every level of life. If you'd like to learn more about us or want to support our mission directly through donation or volunteering some of your time, please visit us online at humanitiesteam.org. And lastly, if you enjoyed this podcast, we'd be grateful if you'd leave us a review. Welcome, everyone, to the Science of Evolution panel. I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Executive Director for Humanities Team. Enjoy the Global Oneness Summit, and thanks so much for joining us. If you'd like to explore the leading edge of science, connection, and oneness, and the deep spiritual implications behind the science, you're in the right place. The new science represents not only the biggest philosophical shift in science, but just as profound philosophic change for humanity. Space, as it turns out, is not what separates us in all things. It's what connects everyone and everything. We now have a more enlightened understanding of the merging of science and spirituality, or more specifically, the unification of unified theory with our spiritual concepts of unity. We've come to the realization that we're all connected, as the mystics have taught, and unified science now confirms. It's like everything is being turned upside down, inside out, as revelations about the impact of unified science are being felt. Holistic thinking is entering all areas of our life, especially the healing arts. All areas of spiritual interest, like prayer, for example, were dismissed by the scientific community because their model could not explain how it worked. Yet we know it does work. This is only one of countless examples of truths that were faith-based and dismissed only because our science model had no explanation. There is now explanation. So in the years directly ahead, things will change in very substantial ways based on our new understandings. The scientists and researchers who are part of this program created a groundbreaking masterclass with Humanities Team called Technology, Consciousness, and Evolution that explores the blurring of man and machine. This fits nicely inside our Global Oneness Summit theme this year, as you will see. They are back today to talk about their research, their conclusions, and their suggestions about implications as we seek to live more loving lives during a time of fundamental change. I'm going to introduce you to the panel now. I'm going to introduce panel members one at a time, and then we'll go right to questions and panel discussion. Gregg Braden is a New York Times bestselling author and internationally renowned as a pioneer in bridging science, spirituality, and the real world. Gregg's work is now featured on the History Channel, the Discovery Channel, the Sci-Fi Channel, ABC, and NBC. His discoveries have led to 11 award-winning books published in 38 languages. He is the author of The Isaiah Effect, Human by Design, and many other best-selling books welcome to the Global Oneness Summit. Gregg, great to have you with us.
Thank you, Steve. It's so good to be with you and my esteemed colleagues, my dear friends, brothers and sisters. And I just want to say hello to everybody watching today. And I am really excited. I think this is a very important panel, Steve. And I'm really excited to get into these questions and where we're going with this.
Me too. And this panel is always one of the most viewed panels during Global Oneness Day. So I'm excited too. Bruce H. Lipton, PhD, is an internationally recognized leader in bridging science and spirit. A stem cell biologist, best-selling author of The Biology of Belief, and recipient of the 2009 Goy Peace Award, he has been a guest speaker on hundreds of TV and radio shows, as well as keynote presenter for national and international conferences. Welcome to the Global Oneness Summit, Bruce. Great to have you with us.
Steve, I am so happy to be here with you, my dear friends, my dearest friend, Gregg and Lynne. So happy to be working with them because of the future vision that they've planted for us to see about where we're going and what's happening. But let me just say the most importantly, I'm very happy that we have this wonderful audience out there, because this audience represents the cultural creatives, the people who are looking for answers outside of the box, because obviously inside the box is a lot of turmoil, and we're going to find peace and love and happiness when we start stepping outside of that box. So I'm so happy to be here with you, Steve, and thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, yes, and you've picked the perfect setting to dial in from there, Bruce. Amen to that, brother. And Lynne McTaggart is an award-winning journalist, researcher, and the author of 7 books, including The Power of 8 and the worldwide bestsellers, The Field, The Intention Experiment, and The Bond, all considered seminal books of the new science and now translated into 30 languages. She's also the architect of the Intention Experiment, a global laboratory involving thousands of readers around the world testing the power of group thoughts to heal the world. And welcome to the Global Oneness Summit, Lynne.
Oh, thank you, Steve. It's wonderful to be here with you once more and with my brothers, Gregg and Bruce, and all of you out there. I'm just so thrilled to be here and honored to be part of this panel. And I guess that the need to look at that bridge between science and spirituality has never been more important than now.
Isn't that the truth? And that's why I'm sure this panel is one of always the most viewed Global Oneness Day panels, because it sets the foundation for Global Oneness Day. We really go down into the science of how this all works. So a lot of ground to cover, and so we're going to go ahead and jump right in. And Gregg, I'm going to bring the first question to you. In talking about the awakening and shift occurring on the earth, you said, and I'm just going to read your quote, "The new shift in thinking is the gateway to human transformation. And because of the sheer number of people involved in this shift and the growing magnitude of the crises that are driving us to change the way we think, we are standing on the threshold of human transformation at a level unlike anything ever before known on earth." End quote. Do you want to share more? Gregg, I think this is
Sure.
Really started here.
Sure, Steve. You know, there's a really beautiful place. It's what I call the sweet spot, where science and spirituality do come together, but it's more than just the science and the spirituality. They come together with social policy. If we're going to be honest with ourselves about the world that we find ourselves in, if we're going to be honest with ourselves about the world we want to see, and the kind of change that we know is possible, then we have to move outside of the traditional boundaries that have confined the sciences and spirituality and social policy and politics and tried to keep them all separate, because the world doesn't work that way, and we're seeing that right now. So I think the beauty of the science is the science is revealing deep truths about us, our relationship to our own bodies, our relationship to one another on many levels, our relationship to the earth, to the cosmos, to a higher power, to the field that we are part of and that connects all things. And as the world is changing in ways that we've never seen and haven't really been prepared to accept, people are now looking for explanations and understandings. Science offers these explanations and understandings in more of a neutral language. It doesn't have the charge and the baggage that maybe some of the other philosophical ways of looking at the world have, Steve. So I think the science has the potential to catapult us light years beyond the issues that we face. And the reason that I made that statement the way that I did, I'll use climate change as a perfect example. There's something called normalcy bias, Steve, and we all experience it to some degree. When things in our lives change so quickly, it's difficult for us to embrace it emotionally and psychologically and mentally and physiologically and even spiritually. And we tend to discount that change and try to live our lives as if nothing has happened, as if it's business as usual. Climate change is a perfect example. We're still trying to build power lines above ground, even though ice storms in New England wipe them out every year and people go for weeks without power, rather than acknowledging that climate change is a fact and putting those power lines underground. So the storms wouldn't be that much of a problem. I mean, that's an example. COVID-19 is driving us to something similar because we've been conditioned to believe that we cannot trust our bodies, that we need something outside of us to help us to feel safe, to live our lives in the world. We need a chemical in our bodies, or we need wires or chips, as we talked about in the TCE course. And all of this is pushing us to come to new understandings. The solutions already exist, Steve. We already have the solutions to all the big problems in the world, the problems of energy and food and medicine. Those solutions have been there. The obstacle now that faces all of us is to allow our thinking to catch up. The thinking in the world around us and what we accept to be true in the world around us to catch up with what we know is true in our hearts. And that's one of the reasons this panel is so exciting, because this group of scientists and researchers, we have learned to cross those traditional boundaries to take us to places that we haven't been in the past, to transcend the limitations of our beliefs in the past, and then do that. Doing that, it gives us an evolutionary edge, Steve, that we've never seen. And that was the reason I made that statement.
Yeah, wow, beautiful. Yeah, thank you, Gregg. That does really start us off well. And so, Bruce, I'm going to come over to you. You sometimes share the quantum physics and biology research supporting oneness. Can you just come in briefly and share what? And of course, you are a biologist. Your perspective here when we talk about what oneness is and love that we can infer from that.
We have to understand that a civilization is based on a set of truths that the people buy. What's true? And then we build a culture based on what we believe to be true. And so I say then over the history of Western civilization, there have been civilizations that have come and gone and new ones coming and going, and we're part of that transition right now. And I say, well, what is the difference from one civilization to the other? And I say a profound change in beliefs about the world from one to the next. So the previous civilization was Judeo-Christian monotheism, which gave us the belief that there's a spiritual force, God controlling us, so like we're marionettes in a world, and a whole bunch of rules come down about living in that world. And the big significance is when science came in, it changed the belief about the universe. Because prior to science, everything was one, the spiritual universe that we always talk about in biblical times, etc. But when science came in, Newton gave us an understanding of which we call classical physics, Newtonian physics, that we split the universe into two realms, the physical realm and the energetic invisible realm. Now, science, to survive when it started because the church was in control, science couldn't step on the toes of the church because they were all powerful. And so what was interesting was that Newton, splitting the universe into matter and energy, said, oh, good, we'll deal with the human body as a piece of matter. And we're not going to talk about any energy because that wasn't in the realm of that physics, that only matter could affect matter. A body's made out of matter. You want to change it? Put matter into it, such as drugs. Okay, that was the belief system. And what it separated was physics from metaphysics. Physics said we study the material world, and then science gave to the church, you guys can have metaphysics, the invisible world, and that was a separation that has always existed, spirituality versus science in their understanding. But almost 100 years ago, a new physics came in, quantum physics, changes everything in our truth about how the universe works. Only one problem. it hasn't really penetrated into this culture, the fullest understanding. I say, well, what is the understanding? That there are no two realms to the universe. There's only one realm to the universe. Everything is made out of energy. We are an illusion of energy. I love the Einstein quote that said, reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. And I say, so what's the relevance? And I go, what we have separated before is a spiritual realm, separate from the material realm. In quantum physics, the two come together. And Lynn wrote the most wonderful book called The Field, which people really have to understand to bring us into the context of science. I say, what is it? I say, the field is an invisible energy aquarium in which we're living. Wherever you're sitting right now, broadcasts from cell phones, TVs, radios, even the sun, there's invisible energy that we're living in. We had separated it from the world, but science brought it in, calls it the field. And then I want to just emphasize very quickly, the relevance of the field is Einstein's quote again, the field is the sole governing agency of matter. Point. It's the invisible forces that we haven't paid attention to that are shaping what we call the particulate form of matter. And I say, well, what's the definition of field? Invisible moving forces that influence the physical world. Yes, the invisible forces are shaping us. I go, well, interesting. Thousands of years ago, spirituality was what? Invisible moving forces that were influencing the physical world. I go, so what's the relevance? The relevance is the duality of a universe coming together in a unity also brings the history of spirituality and understanding a scientific basis that says the energy, the field, is shaping who we are. And then the recognition in biology is that consciousness is a field that we are generating. Our consciousness is shaping our reality. And I go, well, that was the first principle in quantum physics. Consciousness is creating our reality. Simple point. In science, hardcore, change your consciousness and you change the world. So we are operating from a consciousness that is defective. That defective consciousness has led us into what is called the mass extinction. We're in the sixth mass extinction of life caused by humans because of our consciousness of who we are, what we're doing on this planet, why we're here, with a failure of understanding that we have destroyed the environment in which we live. And the relevance is simple. It basically says if consciousness is creating this reality, a fact of the most valid science on planet Earth, quantum physics, most valid, and consciousness is the principle that they attribute to shaping the world, most valid science. And then it says, why are we here with you, Steve? Why do we have this community out here? And the answer is simply this. We came to understand the role of consciousness, spirituality, which is called field, in shaping our world. And if we understand this, we can change from the collapse of civilization we're experiencing right now into the expression of a new civilization that we could thrive, because we came here to create heaven on earth. We're not doing a great job of it right now, but that's because we need to bring in new consciousness, new awareness. And so working with Lynn and Gregg, I feel so honored because all of us are trying to bring in the ideas, look, if you change your mind, you change the world. And so we hope we have enough information to help people change in such a way to create a more wonderful, healthy, wholesome world. So that's why we're here, and I love being here because evolution is in our own hands to change.
Yes, it is. Boy, and you really framed there our theme this year for Global Oneness Day, the power of love, resetting humanity to a new way of living on the earth. You're pointing straight at it there, Bruce. Also, you referenced Lynn's work here in the field. So, Lynn, I'm going to come over to you. I've met people who share that you were the one who first educated them about oneness and the implications in our daily living. Can you share some of the more important messages or some of the most important messages regarding oneness and the implications in your teachings?
Sure. I mean, first of all, as Gregg and Bruce have indicated, the issue we have now is that we're living according to a false scientific story. You know, we always have to bear in mind that science is not this finite truth for all time. Science is a story, and every so often new chapters get written that supplant the ones before. And a new chapter is now being released and has been released for some time now, I'd say more than 50 years. A revolution in science has taken place that has completely replaced the Newtonian vision of the world. I mean, what we believed before was, thanks to Isaac Newton and then the work of Charles Darwin, they essentially described a world of separateness. You know, that we were all very well-behaved, separate things operating according to fixed laws in time and space. Even little atoms were made up of tiny subatomic particles that were well-behaved billiard balls. But we now know we're something different, very different. And we now understand that rather than being separate, lonely entities in a lonely planet, in a lonely universe, that we are all so impossibly interconnected that it is not possible to separate us now and to say definitively where I end and you begin. So we understand from the smallest particles of our being to our environment, to everyone with whom we come into contact, there is essentially a bond, which means a connection so profound and integral that it's impossible to say where one thing ends and another thing begins. Now, we understand that with this whole concept of the field, that we are all part of a giant quantum energy field. And a lot of people talk about, well, I'm going to enter the field. You don't have to enter anywhere. You're here. You're in it. You're having a conversation with it all the time. Your subatomic particles are interacting with everyone else's at every moment. And so we are part of this giant quantum energy field and connecting with it. And so what does this have to do with what's going on right now? What it has to do with is all of these systems around us are now breaking down, accelerated by something like COVID-19 and all of the unrest going on, not because we're running out of food or anything, or air or water or anything important. What we have is run out of a scientific story. And what's ending is the story that we've been told. And in that ending is the only path to a better future. So why is oneness so important, so central in our lives? Because as you said, as Bruce said, consciousness, you know, we are all part of a singular consciousness, a single consciousness. We all connect, and there's plenty of theories and evidence out there that even our thoughts are not locked inside our heads. They're trespassers, connecting and changing and affecting everything in the world. But also, we are connecting together all the time. What I have found in my work, and my work is about group intention, group thoughts, and whether or not they have powers to change the world. And what I have found that is so essential is that when we can enter that state of oneness, when we move beyond this sense of this separate self, then we enter a place of miracles. We enter the miraculous whole. We enter that spiritual realm, that mystical realm that the ancients, as Bruce said, were always talking about. We experience oneness. And we also heal. And I've seen thousands of healings in my work, in small power bait groups and also big groups with the intention experiment. And with every healing, the person who is healed describes getting into a state of oneness, moving beyond that state of separation. So I would go further than saying it's an important element. I would say it is the recipe for change.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, and thus Global Oneness Day in its 11th year. It is so fundamental to this whole future, this new humanity and new Earth that we're all working together to manifest. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, so Gregg, I'm going to come back to you, and as I bring you this question too, we can we can bring in some of, you all have already referenced COVID-19, the pandemic, and George Floyd and these people of color issues. We can bring in these things here as well in this next set of questions as I'm coming around. And so, Gregg, you teach about heart coherence and global coherence. And does love have a role here?
Wow, Steve, we could do a whole program to answer that question. I'm going to go back. Lynn, thank you for laying the foundation so beautifully, so that we can all tie in to the way that you've described our relationship to the field. And I think this is one of the most foundational shifts in thinking, Steve, that we are faced with right now, and especially teaching our young people. When I go to a scientific conference, often the scientists, they now are in agreement that the field is there. They'll say, yes, we discovered the field. Actually, it's always been there. They only recognized it. But they'll say, we discovered it. But here's what they do, Steve. They say, yeah, there's a field out there that connects all things. And they're always doing this. The field is out there, and we are here. And one of the things I've found that really helps young people is when we remind them that every atom within their bodies that makes up the molecules and the cells of their bodies, those atoms are constantly emerging from that field and collapsing back into the field in this beautiful dynamic dance right this minute, right this second. So we are the field. And our indigenous ancestors and many ancient philosophies remind us that we are essentially what they would call wrinkles or distortions in the field held in place by our consciousness and the way our consciousness creates that wrinkle. Well, where love comes into this, and this is such a beautiful way to really anchor this, is the best science of our world now is telling us that we are highly advanced, highly sophisticated, soft technology. 50 trillion cells in the body. Each cell about 0.07 volts of electrical potential. Each cell does everything in our bodies that the electronics do outside of our bodies. They transmit information, they receive information, they store information, they emit photons of light, they receive photons of light, they tune into subtle wavelengths. And we are the operators of this soft technology, and this is where it all comes together so beautifully. Love. Love is what hones our operating system. Love is what gives us the ability to optimize our relationship to this field. In the past, the idea of love has been just that. It has been nebulous. It means different things to different people. It's been an esoteric and somewhat poetic attribute that people have aspired to. But now science is changing that. Because what the science is showing us, Steve, and this is going to go right to the core of the question, is that when we learn to focus our awareness, breathe in a very precise way, and create specific emotions in our heart, we send a signal, a low-frequency signal to the brain that harmonizes the heart and the brain in what is called coherence, as you just referenced. That signal, when it is optimum, is also low frequency. It's 0.1 hertz. It's a very, very low frequency. It's the frequency that whales communicate with in the oceans. It's a fundamental frequency. This is where the science is really getting interesting, because not only do we harmonize our heart and our brain and all the cells and the organs and the tissues in our body when we create the coherence between the heart and the brain, now the scientists, and as a geologist, I love this, because the science is telling us that 0.1 hertz tunes us to a fundamental magnetic field frequency of the planet we live on. It's called the magnetic field line resonance. The first spike in a graph of the magnetic field line resonance, 0.1 hertz. So when we love from our heart, creating the emotions and the feelings, sending 0.1 hertz to our brain, bringing our body into harmony and balance, not only are we harmonizing our existence, our being, but we are harmonizing ourselves to the fundamental magnetic frequency of the planet that we live on. This is where our healing begins. And the beauty of this, Steve, is this is where we've come full circle, because our most ancient and cherished indigenous and spiritual traditions have always told us that the love begins in our heart. Science now has come full circle, bringing us back to that understanding, and it's happening at a time when we are being pushed to the edge of what we believe to be true about ourselves and our relationship to the world, so that we can shift that belief. Science gives us a rock-solid reason now to begin to make that shift and to embrace the power of love and oneness in our lives. And you can't make this stuff up. This is the way the universe works. It's happening now. This may not have been possible 20 years ago because we were not pushed to the edge of who we think we are 20 years ago the way we are right now. So I think the timing is perfect.
Yeah, boy, thank you. That was beautiful. A lot of wisdom that you infused into that response there, Gregg. Thank you. And so, Lynn, I'm going to come over to you, and you teach that cooperation, not competition, are in our genetic makeup. Does love enter in when we talk about who we are as human beings?
Well, this goes back to this whole idea that we've been fed the wrong story, that it's now time to adopt a new scientific story. And the other aspect of the false scientific story that we've been told is that we are in competition. That life is a race to the finish line, and so you better darn well get there first. What we're discovering when you start really drilling down into the science is that we were made to cooperate, not to compete, that people need essentially four things. They need to belong, they need to agree in lots of ways, they need to, and I'll explain that in a minute, they need to give, and they need things to be fair. Those are parts of this whole need for cooperation. We find that, the science shows that people need to belong more than anything else. They need to cluster into communities. That's why suicides kill themselves. Psychologists call it excessive individuation. They feel left out, and being left out is something that people cannot bear. We see that belonging protects people from heart attacks in the main, from strokes, and even the common cold. That connection is that essential to our beings. But so are things like fairness and agreeing. I mean, we actually unconsciously imitate each other all the time. I have neurons in my brain, and you have neurons in your brain, so that when you are involved in an action or an emotion, the very same neurons fire in me, then fire as if I were having that emotion, that I were having that action. So we were born to essentially understand each other, to, immediately empathize. So we have that kind of hard wiring to connect. And when you say love is essential and the absolute center of this whole cooperation. We were made to love and to give. We believe and we're told by the Darwinians that, that it's all about being selfish. Even our genes are selfish. But in fact, somebody put it very unsentimentally, scratch an altruist and watch a hypocrite bleed. And that is completely untrue, because when you study, as a guy called Samuel Olander, who survived a Nazi pogrom and was hidden for 2 years by a woman who was a Catholic, who had a family, a husband and a family, and would have been immediately killed for hiding a Jew. He grew up, came to America, and asked the question, why did she do it? Why would somebody risk their life and her family's life for a relative stranger? So he made it his life's work to study giving. And he found, as many people do, that we are also hardwired to give. We give without thinking. You look at not just the firemen going up the Twin Towers, but people who jump into icy waters to save people. One plane crash in Toronto. The authorities believed that everybody had died, but they had to soon revise their comments about it, because so many people who were at a highway near where it crashed got out, ran into that burning plane, and got out the passengers that there were no fatalities. Everybody survived. And this was even after 9/11, when these could have been a terrorist attack. But people run in without thinking. Altruism and giving and being a good Samaritan is hardwired into us. We need to do that. But here's the interesting thing. People have always thought that it's all about empathy, that we feel somebody else's pain. That's why we have to give, that we love out of empathy. But actually, brainwave studies have shown that we give when we most, and we connect most with other people when we enter that state of oneness. So it is about a love that's beyond individual love, love of a partner or whatever. This is a love that needs another name. It needs a capital letter. It's a love that transcends all individual feeling, and it is about that state of connection and perfect unity.
Yeah, boy, beautiful. Lynn, and as you were talking, I was reminded of a trip I did last year. I was invited to go on to a youth leadership conference in Shanghai, China, and they were kids from all over the world and their parents there, and they were involved in this youth leadership conference, and I was one of the evaluators or judges of that, and a family, the Ken Baring family was paying for this whole thing in China. And he'd actually passed away a couple weeks before the trip, so he wasn't with us. But his wife and all of his sons and family were with us as we went over on their private jet and things. And he was a billionaire, Ken Baring. And so he had this huge 737 style private jet, and he had this museum with all these antique cars and mansions and things. But at the end of his life, what he was sharing in his last decade was that he started something called the Wheelchair Foundation, and started giving wheelchairs to people all over the world that didn't have mobility. And because it not only created a life for the people that didn't have mobility, but their family members that had been carrying them around and things anchored to the person also now had got their lives back. So there was this huge gift in just a little wheelchair. And he said that the simple act of giving opened his heart in a way that he'd never experienced in his whole life. And therefore, his best years were those final years. And I thought, wow, what a neat story to hear from his family. Well, Bruce, I'm going to come over to you. You teach about creating heaven on earth and the honeymoon effect. Can we reset humanity to the power of love, a new way of living on the earth here?
Well, that is the best thing in the whole world, this understanding of the nature of love. And I just want to emphasize a point very quickly, is that people think that love and hate are the opposites of each other, when this is not really true. It's love and fear. And I say, why is that different? I say, well, an organism will move toward anything that offers stimuli of growth, which is love. And they'll move toward that being open to assimilate whatever they're seeing. But in contrast, if the stimulus is something fear, then protection is really the response. And protection is to close yourself down and move away from the stimulus. And I go, so what's the relevance? I say, well, love is move to the stimulus. Fear is move away from the stimulus. Love is be open, and fear is to be closed. They're mutually exclusive behaviors for biology. And we have fear. There are good reasons to have fear for certain things, like if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, that might be a good time to exercise a fear response, which stops our growth but prepares us for protection. And I go, so why is it relevant? Because if you shut down growth, you shut down life. And I say, so what's that relevant to? And I say, well, as we've been talking about, we're facing an upheaval right now. And I say, why are we facing this upheaval? Because human behavior has been misprogrammed. And as a result, we are undermining not just our relationship to each other, we're undermining our relationship to the planet. And now we've reached this very desperate moment that we're in the sixth mass extinction. And I go, what's important about it? Of course, there were 5 previous mass extinctions, but they were attributed to physical things, comets hitting the earth, tectonic plate movements, Today we're facing the sixth mass extinction because human behavior. And human behavior has isolated us in a fear. And I say why? Because science is the principal driver of our culture, and we bought into a belief system called Darwinian evolution. There are two big problems that come from Darwinian theory. Number one is genes control your life. I go, so what's relevant? You don't control your life. Your genes control your life. As far as you know, you didn't pick them. You can't change them. We're told that they turn on and off independent of who we are. And all of a sudden, I'm a victim of my heredity, which means being powerless. That's number one. And then we're also, in the same theory, given the reality that Lynne mentioned, that this is based on competition, survival of the fittest. So we're out against each other because it's a dog-eat-dog world, and if you're not at the top, you're not here. So we have a fear of what? If we're not competing, we're going to lose. So we have two fears. I don't control my health, and I'm in a world of desperate competition. And I go, well, guess what? Those beliefs based on Darwinian theory are completely false. And I say, but if you don't know that, then you create the world based on what? Fear, isolation, I'm against you, you're against me. This is why we end up here today. A new understanding of evolution has fact that it has nothing to do with the genes. It has everything to do with nervous system and consciousness. That's the driving force. So that's something we have control over versus genes we were told we have no control over. So number one, we control our biology and our genetics through our consciousness. It's called epigenetics. Number two, the fear of competition and survival, which, everybody goes out there in that world to fight every day, is a false fear again, because it turns out that evolution is totally based on cooperation, complete opposite of the world that we have created, because we're creating our world with consciousness. If I infuse victim, if I infuse competition into that consciousness, and we create the world we have today. And what we're talking about in the new science that Lynne and Gregg and I have been, really been talking about for decades now, is the simple reality is, what if you change that consciousness? And I go, well, since consciousness is creating a world, guess what? The moment you change that consciousness, you change your experience of the world. And as you introduce, there's something called the Honeymoon Effect that I wrote about, and that is your life every day in the conventional world that we've been programmed to believe, that fighting, competition, victim of genes, believing that every day our life is blah, 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 blah. And then I say, but what happens when somebody falls in love? And I go, they could have blah, 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 blah for years, and yet they fall in love, and in 24 hours, their worldview is completely changed. That 24 hours after falling in love, a person who had a blah, blah, blah life goes, oh, life is so beautiful. Oh, everything's so wonderful. Love has created this great, wonderful experience of heaven on earth. I go, wait a minute. That heaven on earth was here all the time. I go, yes, it was, but our belief system in our day-to-day life, the fear has shut us down, and shutting down a living organism, disconnecting from the environment, is death. And I say, so what? And I say, the moment we start experiencing love, guess what happens? We stop playing the programs. For the first time in your life, you stop playing the programs of fear, and you start doing love. What's love? Open, expressing, taking in the world, being in harmony with the world. And I say, and the experience of love changes the life of competition and fear into heaven on earth. I say, why is it relevant? That's not a mystery. It's basically saying, are we living in the fear world of a Darwinian theory, or we're going to live in the new world of love is the harmony that enhances growth and health and life on this planet, which we all know if you've ever experienced it. And I go, yeah, but that's on an individual level. And I go, and last things here, so I close it out, is, well, my thoughts about love are in my head. And I go, no, they're created in your head, but they're broadcast to the field. Point is, if I put wires on your head, electroencephalograph, I could read the love experience inside your head, that you've just fallen in love and everything is heaven. But now we have a new device to read brain functions called magnetoencephalograph, not electroencephalograph. I say, point, the probe is out here. I say, so why is it relevant? Your thoughts are not contained in your head. You are broadcasting. Well, you're broadcasting fear or love. And I go, well, that depends on how many people are broadcasting love and how many people are broadcasting fear, because if each one of us is a tuning fork, amplification of the broadcast is based on the number of people sharing a consciousness. And if we move out of the fear consciousness we've been programmed with now, and all of us as tuning forks start to open up and go, wait, there's a love consciousness, then the entire planet will change when we reach that critical level of how many people are in love versus how many people are in fear. And we're on that threshold right now because, as TM people tell us, you don't need the whole world to do this change. You just need a coherent group within that world, I think it's the square root of 1%. And I know we have that number of people listening to us right now, that if all of us just today said, wait, forget fear, I'm in love, that we, just in our group, will have an impact on this planet, and I know Gregg talks about that with heart math that shows as soon as we change our consciousness, we have changed the field of the earth. And so it says, hey, we're not victims. We're just programmed. And that if we change our understanding about who we are, how powerful we are, and our connection to the field, then all of a sudden heaven on earth is not just an individual experience, it's a planetary experience. And this is what we're being called upon by nature to say, your fear experiences have destroyed yourselves and your planet. A love experience will bring it all back. And that's why we're here, and that's why I'm so thankful that we have all those people out here, Steve, because we have the capability ourselves to change this planet.
All right. Wow. Well, we've turned the soil and we've created a fertile garden here. So perfect.
Let me just add, Steve, a very simple point about the garden. A garden is not a battleground. A garden is the height of cooperation of every individual comprising that garden. We came from a garden, turned it into a battleground, and at this moment in our recognition is we have to change the belief and bring back garden cooperation.
Yes, we do. Wow, and you all have really brought that in so many profound and wonderful ways. So I want to try something which we've done before. Gregg, you call it our speed round. So let's do a speed round. So I'm just thinking if it works, let's do a speed round on two things where we just 30 seconds to a minute each. First on this extraordinary time in which we live, our theme this year, the power of love, resetting humanity to a new way of living on the earth. Just this, how maybe COVID-19 and being sequestered and George Floyd and all of these people of color issues have maybe created an opportunity to pivot to all of the things that we're talking about to this reset. So we'll go around on that real quick. And then after that, we'll go around quickly on Smarter, Stronger, Faster, the free video series you all created that talks about this blurring of man and machine. As we were sharing when we came onto this program, this is perhaps I think the greatest on-demand program that soon will be on demand that's there out in the marketplace because it gets to such important topics. So let's start with the sequester and the George Floyd, et cetera. Just 30 seconds to a minute, Gregg, and then Lynne and Bruce, and then we'll go quickly around on Smarter, Stronger, Faster, the collaboration on this new free video series.
Well, so this is the lightning round, Steve. That's what this is. So you just asked two questions. Does that mean I get a minute for each question, or you want a minute in total?
We'll do the first one, 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll do the second one on Smarter, Stronger, Faster.
All right, so what I will say is this. What COVID-19 has done is to push us en masse to come to terms with love and love for ourselves. Our bodies are made to adapt to times just like this. We have done it successfully for over 200,000 years to the contagions that have come to us. We have a society telling us we need something outside of our bodies to feel safe and to be able to love in the world without fearing the threat of the virus. What we are now faced with is a single, very simple question, Steve. Our bodies are made for this if we give our bodies what they need to be at their best. And this comes down to the fundamental question, do we love ourselves enough to honor ourselves, to give our bodies what they need? And this is all the things we already know about. This is about nutrition. It's about sleep. It's about the emotional environment and the relief of stress. It's about the way we move our bodies. Do we love ourselves enough to give ourselves what we need to not just survive, but to thrive, to transcend what it is that the world has just brought to our doorstep? Number one. Number two, the field that we're all talking about here. This, when it comes down to protests, when it comes down to being angry in the streets, I know that many of those are well-intentioned, but I'm just going to share the science. The field that we are part of only knows harmony and coherence or chaos. That's all it knows. So when we find ourselves angrily fighting and protesting against the things we don't like, admittedly with good intentions, what we're actually doing, we have to ask ourselves, are we feeding this field that we're a part of and that connects all things? Are we feeding the field chaos? Or are we feeding the field coherence? That should inform us in terms of our actions. Because when we're out there fighting in the streets, what we're doing is we are wreaking havoc and chaos in the field that actually feeds the separation, feeds the anger, and feeds the hurt. Buckminster Fuller said this best. He says, you're never going to change the world by fighting against what you don't like. He says, if you want to bring lasting change into the world, find a new way of doing things that makes the old way obsolete, and everyone will follow that new way. And in that, you're not pushing against what you don't like. You're putting your energy into your heart's desire. And this is what Bruce is talking about. This is how we tend our garden. This is how we bring heaven to earth. This is our honeymoon. So I think those two things, Steve, are I'm seeing right now from the hurt and the anger around the protests and what COVID-19 is pushing us as individuals to come to terms with within ourselves. And the bottom line that connects them both together is love and unity.
And then 20 seconds on Smarter, Stronger, Faster. I'm sorry to get such a short period of time because it's such an amazing free video series you all created. And by the way, this is on the Humanities Team website. When you go to free courses on the Humanities Team website, just look at free courses. You'll see Smarter, Stronger, Faster, which is this. It's actually 3 hours of free video content on this, on the science of smarter, stronger, and faster.
So, Steve, are you asking me now to comment on?
If you want to take 50 seconds on that.
It's a perfect segue because what that program is inviting us to do is what we just said. We're at a powerful crossroads in civilization and in technology where we are now being forced to choose as to whether or not we embrace the deep truth of our inner technology, our soft technology, and the operating system of love and consciousness to self-regulate our biology in a way that no other form of life is known to do. Are we going to choose that path, or are we going to give our power away as we are being coerced through media and through popular narratives? Are we going to give our power away to computer chips, to wires and chemicals that are placed and injected into our bodies with the belief that we need those to level the playing field in the world that's emerging? Are we going to give our humanness away to the technology? And once we do, it's gone forever. And the reason we created the course that we did, Lynn and Bruce and I, is because we can't even answer that question, Steve. We can't answer the question until we know fully what it means to be human. And I think COVID-19 and the hurt and the anger in the streets is pushing us to come to terms with that answer.
Yes, it is. Okay, and Lynn, to you next just for a minute on these things, the fertile soil here for resetting humanity and then the contribution you've made to this free video series, Smarter, Stronger, Faster.
Okay, so mostly one of the problems with COVID-19, aside from the fear aspect, is that it is creating isolation. which is the worst kind of state that humans can be in. So we are having to learn new ways of connecting. And I think this is one thing that we can do with the new technology to transcend some of the issues we face now. I find, for instance, there's thousands of groups that I'm working with that are using little Power of 8 groups. They're meeting virtually. And this is keeping their humanity together and allowing them to experience love in this highly isolated time. I want to really address, though, the issue that's going on with us now. I think that the George Floyd stuff is an eruption of a huge just an enormous sense of unfairness. Remember, I said earlier that fairness is very important. It's like belonging. We want to give, but we need to know somebody else will give back. And this is a real feeling now of unrequited humanity. And what it's doing is polarizing us to the point where we demonize people who don't agree with us. And one of the things that I work on in my workshops is asking people to set positive intentions for people they don't agree with while they listen to their backstories of why they believe what they believe. Because, we now think we have to demonize people who are not like us. If they don't agree with us, we have to destroy them. And, that's part of that leftover from competition. So we have to really relearn what it is to be open to a different point of view. And that is all part of this fairness. So I think the dialogues, as much as everything else, are someplace where we need to start. As for our course, my own contribution was trying to demonstrate to people that we don't need all of this fancy technology like AI, etc., to advance in our evolution. We have extraordinary powers inside of us and collectively that are more powerful than any equipment we can invent. And so some of what I try to demonstrate is showing the science that we can transcend time and space, that we have the ability with our thoughts individually and collectively to affect things. Thoughts are not only things, but things that affect other things. And we can help create, shape, and heal our world with it. That we can forecast, that we can read each other's thoughts. We can, heal our own bodies and loads of others. We have these amazing capacities. And so we just have to learn how to use them. Relearn how to use them.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, thank you, Lynn. And Bruce, just very briefly, because I'm going to close this out here as we come up on the end of hour, but just the things you'd like to share about this, this reset that's going on and your contribution with Smarter, Stronger, Faster.
Well, Steve, very quickly, very simple understanding is this. There's an old saying, you can't see the forest through the trees. And let me relate that to this moment here. And I say, if we look at every symptom that's out there as a tree, and that's the Floyd killing, the COVID-19, the racial, religious problems, economic upheaval, climate change, and all of a sudden I'm adding all these different things up on top, and I say, these are trees, and we could focus on any tree. Let's focus on climate change. Let's focus on racial injustice. I go, wait, you're focusing on the trees, but you're failing to see there's a bigger forest here. All of these symptoms are part of an overriding problem, and we're bringing, brought to our face. Wake up, you got these symptoms, and while we were looking at trying to fix each symptom, we failed to see the symptoms are an expression of a larger cause. The larger cause is this: human behavior is undermining our community of life, including the entire planet's web of life, and we are doing that. That's why we are responsible for the extinction that we're facing our own extinction. And I say, nature didn't give us this. Nature gave us the garden. And I say, so where did this come from? And I say, we are not living in harmony with ourselves and the planet around us, and as a result, this is the falling apart. Love is the expression of total harmony. And so basically it says, stop focusing on these little symptoms and start recognizing we as a civilization must change the foundational beliefs that got us to the point, which are primarily Darwinian theory, in fact, and open up to a new insight, a new belief, a new consciousness. Because if our consciousness is shaping the world, then obviously the current version of consciousness is problematic, and the world is telling us. So it says, wake up or die. That's extinction. And we're given this opportunity. So this is why we're here. We can wake up. And we already have the answers, as Gregg always talks about. The answers are always here. We just have to actually live those answers. And this thing will have the most happy ending that anyone could ever imagine.
And that'll be the last word. Thank you. Wow, Gregg, Bruce, and Lynn. Woo. Huge thank you and namaste. What a powerful and transformative hour it's been. I know I'm speaking for all of our viewers, so thank you so much. Now, in closing, I want to call attention to the quantum physics, the biology, geology, and other science and research that affirms our connection, our oneness, and love, actually, is our basis. This science is applied to many modern fields, including quantum mechanics, health, education, relationships, personal empowerment, and much more. The web of life is real. We are all one. Is much more than a beautiful turn of phrase. It's a powerful description of ultimate reality. The Global Oneness Summit invites us to live by a new golden rule where we understand what we do for others, we do for ourselves with a capital S, because in truth, there is no other. We understand that how we live into the unity of all of life affects everyone and everything, as this panel has shared so beautifully, because we are all interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent. This means we are loving with each other, and very importantly, now we can see that this is our natural state. Let's live with a positive purpose and let our lives be an expression of our oneness and love. When we do this, we invite others to live this way also. Before long, everyone is living this way together, and we create the flourishing world and the earth that we've always known is possible. This is the mission and purpose of the Global Oneness Summit. I also want to invite you to check out Gregg, Bruce, and Lynn's free video series that we were just talking about. It's called Smarter, Stronger, Faster, and you can find details on at humanitiesteam.org under the go to the free courses page, and you'll see that amazing. It's a 3-hour-long video series. It's free. Now, once again, I'd like to thank this panel, Bruce, Gregg, and Lynn, and all of the speakers participating in the Global Oneness Summit, our affiliate partners, the 2019 panel moderators, and my colleagues in Humanities team who work on the Global Oneness Summit year-round. Together, all of us actually make this summit possible in this new earth and new humanity that we're calling forth at this very moment. Before we begin, we're going to be silent for 10 seconds to center ourselves in oneness with the divine and each other. We call this a oneness moment. We're going to begin our oneness moment right now. If you'd like to receive all of our new podcast episodes, please click on the subscribe button. To find out more about Humanities Team transformational education programs and about how you can help support our mission, please visit us online at humanitiesteam.org, where you can also sign up for our email list so we can let you know about our free online events and other news about what we're up to each week. And again, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review. Thank you.